Hey guys, in this video I'm going to review the game The Last of Us for PS3, and I'm going to try to keep it as spoiler free as possible, just because I figure that most of the people who would watch this video haven't played the game yet. So yeah, I won't give any story stuff away, or at least I'll try not to. But yeah, just to sort of get into the introduction a little bit, I wasn't originally planning on buying or playing this game. I expected it to get great reviews. You know, um, because reviewers and gamers alike tend to fall over themselves to praise these ambitious story based games like BioShock, Grand Theft Auto 4, Heavy Rain. They tend to give like a sort of A for effort. If people try to make these interesting universes, um, which actually I haven't really liked any of those games that I listed previously, especially Heavy Rain. I'm not going to get into why here. Um, but I also I'm not really a huge fan of Naughty Dog in general. In case you're wondering, they made the Crash Bandicoot games on the PS1, the Jak and Daxter games on the PS2, the Uncharted games on PS3, and some other stuff along the way too. But those are sort of the three major franchises they're known for. I didn't really like them really. Crash I thought was okay actually, not great. Definitely not on Mario 64's level, but actually people I trusted who were usually skeptical about these kind of games, they were praising it, so I decided to ultimately get it. I actually beat this game like 3 or 4 weeks ago. I meant to review this, but I actually got busy with Fourth of July stuff, and I was gone for a while. So apologies for that, but so yeah, let's sort of go over like the sort of back of the box, like sort of summary of the premise of the game. Uh, Hopefully, I'll try to make this quick. So basically, the game is set in a post-apocalyptic world. It's plagued by a virus that turns people into these zombie-like creatures called the Infected, and I hesitate to call them zombies because I kind of figure that zombies are the Walking Dead, so to speak. The undead, and these aren't. They're just infected. But yeah, it takes place 20 years after the start of the apocalypse, and the main protagonist, Joel, knew life before the apocalypse, while his 14-year-old partner, Ellie, was born in the post apocalyptic society. So that's all she knows, pretty much. And they start off in a military quarantine zone where uninfected people live. But they go out on a quest to seek a cure, for the infected. I won't get into why they're paired up. Um, Again, I don't want to spoil it too much. But yeah, let's talk about the game a little bit. Sort of when you're in control of Joel, you sort of run around small environments like towns, the woods, sewer type environments, and you can't really get lost because oftentimes you get to the next area by climbing over a tall ledge and like dropping into the next location. You can't go back to the previous one. They kind of do this in Halo, so you can't backtrack. Um, to the very beginning of the game. And there are certain objects in the game you interact with by pressing the triangle button. It's pretty much like the action button, so to speak. Like ladders, you can climb up those, and wooden boards, you can pick those up. And actually, in the beginning of the game, I had a little trouble figuring out what you could and couldn't interact with because the rules are often inconsistent. Like you can open certain doors and not others, which is kind of annoying. And you can pick up some like wooden boards, but not others. And for that reason, simple sections often took minutes for me to figure out. Though I eventually got a sense of what objects you could and couldn't use in the game, as the time progressed. But what I did like about that aspect is that it didn't insult you like other games, such as Bioshock, where it constantly gives you an arrow above your head telling you where to go, thus defeating the purpose of actual level design. Um, that was always like a pet peeve of mine, like sort of the dumbed down nature of a lot of modern games. Occasionally, in some of the trickier areas, it'll give you the option to press the L3 button It'll sort of nudge you in the right direction. It won't give you the exact answer to the puzzle. Um, so yeah, it doesn't like it does it's not dumbed down in that regard, which I find really neat. So let's talk about one aspect of the game that I was actually pleasantly surprised about, the combat. And you sort of associate AAA games these days with these sort of shallow, mechanical experiences where the actual, game mechanics take a backseat to cinematics. Like in Assassin's Creed, the combat's really, just a button masher essentially, and there's not much to it. But actually, I'd say the biggest strength of this game is the combat. It's surprisingly deep for what it is. It's basically a third-person survival game. I wouldn't call it a horror game because it's not very scary. It sort of focuses on survival. The bullets and supplies are scarce, which actually makes every encounter in the game, sort of battle, quote unquote, more challenging and meaningful because you're not just like spraying bullets everywhere like in other games. And because of this, it actually forces you to use all of your weapons, whereas in a lot of other shooters, you tend to stick with just a couple of them. The more powerful ones. Kind of like in Gears of War, where you have like hundreds of bullets for each weapon, pretty much. Well, not really, but you have a lot. Um, and sort of mow down dozens of enemies with that. But I think they clearly felt self-conscious about the criticism aimed at the Uncharted games. Like how Drake is a mass murderer, but at the same time he's the everyman. Just like a regular dude. And they actually address this in the game through the narrative by making Joel and Ellie sort of anti-heroes. They sort of like justify them killing people by sort of, through the story itself. Um, they're kind of as messed up as everyone else in the world, so it's like they're just, a part of this whole, messed up universe. Another aspect of the combat I found cool is that there's weapon sway in the game, meaning the aiming reticle doesn't stay still when you're aiming, which makes sense because you're kind of controlling a 50-year-old guy instead of a trained military dude. And there's sort of a delay with everything he does. Like reloading weapons, switching weapons, crafting items, which I may get into later. And, with all these sort of limitations, it's wise to use stealth during enemy encounters. I should also mention it's sort of a stealth game, kind of like Metal Gear Solid, but not. It's not as much of a stealth game as stealth sort of defines the Metal Gear Solid series. But you can sneak up on enemies or behind enemies and suffocate them without nearby enemies noticing. And but once someone spots you, everyone will come after you, kind of like most stealth games. And most weapons in the game will alert everyone. And it's not really like in Metal Gear Solid where you can use your tranquilizer gun and pick off people one by one without anyone noticing. Um, yeah, that sort of broke the immersion, quote unquote. But I always thought that was kind of a fun thing about those games. But yeah, there are many different ways to approach enemy encounters, and sometimes you can even run past everyone and skip the confrontation altogether, which I thought was really interesting. So there are 5 different types of enemies in the game, all of which are unique in that you have to approach them differently when you're trying to either kill them or get past them. Some of them you actually do have to kill. It's sort of required, which also sort of adds depth to the game and you know makes it less repetitive and sort of mind numbing, which these games tend to be a lot. These shooters. But yeah, overall, the combat, like I said, had a lot more depth than I thought. It sort of was the reason why I kept playing. It's a very difficult game, surprisingly so for a AAA first party game. I died literally dozens of times throughout the game. The weird thing is that a lot of deaths tend to be sort of like these one hit kills where the main enemy in the game, the clicker, they're the main infected enemy. Once they're in melee range, they can just kill you in one hit, which is sort of frustrating in a way, but it forces you to act to respect the mechanics of the game and sort of actually play well. A lot of AAA games don't demand that you sort of learn the game and play well, which is why I respected The Last of Us for that reason. You it forces you to sort of learn the deeper mechanics of the game and use all the tools you have at your disposal, like sort of grenades and stuff like that, which again I really liked. And the game actually insults you if you die a few times in the same section. It politely tells you you can change the difficulty at any time if you want. Which I thought was really just sort of kicking the balls. I know games have done this before, like Ninja Gaiden. Those games have done that in the past. But it was sort of funny in those games. But in this, it was kind of annoying. I just wanted to point that out. Um, but no. A really important thing about the combat is that it actually felt good. Like all the weapons you get in the game feel good to use. They're unique, and you sort of want to use all of them, or at least most of them. There's a bow and arrow that you get later in the game, which feels really, really nice. It's one of the best bows in video games. And without that, if the weapons didn't feel good, obviously the combat would fall apart. So, felt that was important to note. But let's actually get to the story, which sort of Naughty Dog these days is sort of known for their sort of the story of their games. Starting with the Uncharted games. Didn't really like those stories. I didn't play too much of them, but from what I saw, I didn't like them. But let's talk about The Last of Us. That would be smart. I'd say it has the best voice acting of any video game I've ever played. Which these days it's kind of saying a lot, and it has great character animation, which makes the character interactions in the game more realistic and relatable. Because in a lot of these cinematic games, the character models look good, but they don't animate well, so they look like mannequins, and their eyes they have like this dead eye, so they don't look right. But in Last of Us, they actually sort of animate realistically, which is really nice. And much of the dialogue is actually done while you're playing the game, like while you're walking around. They sort of slow you down in areas where you can't run around and do stuff. It's kind of like in Gears of War when you're talking to Anya, like on your whatever they call it, your earpiece, and you're sort of forced to walk slowly. They have that in this game a lot, which is sort of annoying, but anyway, yeah. There are some cutscenes, but they rarely last for more than a minute or two. Kind of the opposite of Metal Gear Solid 4. And the crux of the story focuses on the relationship between Joel and Ellie. Um, you learn more about their personalities, like as the game progresses. They sort of tell each other a little bit about themselves bit by bit. You sort of get a sense of who their normal personalities are, like when they're not in this sort of like quest. Um, which is like there are just a lot of subtle. There's a lot of subtlety in their interactions with each other, uh, which I'll get into in a bit. But before I played the game, I was expecting the typical, adult male is forcibly paired with a little girl who he doesn't like for the first 80% of the story, only to realize that he actually does care for her by the end. Wreck-It Ralph was kind of the last movie I saw that did this, but it's not really like that in this game. I mean, it is to some degree. They have to show character progression somehow. But actually, while their bond does grow throughout the game, he seems to care for her, sort of, from the beginning, actually, which I actually liked. As for the story itself, and this is where my video gets controversial, and the Naughty Dog fanboys throw stones through my window, I thought it was surprisingly flat. The post-apocalyptic setting and the struggle to survive, it seems like the perfect opportunity to do a lot of interesting things with the characters. But I felt like whenever the game was going into an interesting direction thematically, they wimped out. Like they dipped their toes into issues of race and gender, but they sort of pull out immediately before any meaningful exploration of these topics. are considered. I wish I could go into more about that, but I sort of get the feeling that if Rockstar made this game, they would have gone a little deeper. Um, based on Red Dead Redemption and the GTA games. I feel like they tend to have more balls in that regard. And this is purely speculation, but I just can't help but feel like Naughty Dog wants their games to appeal to everyone, so they're unwilling to delve into issues that might segment some of their audience. I think they're really used to getting like 10 out of 10s in their games, like 9.8s. They don't want like 8.5s or 9s from publications like actually a lot of Rockstar games do get, other than GTA. But I wish I could say more. I really do. If you want to talk to me more about this, you can message me on YouTube or Twitter or something, I guess. But yeah, there's sort of a dilemma at the end of the game. I won't get into it now. Um, but it's ultimately a meaningless dilemma if you learn more about the environment and sort of if you learn more about the context. It's not much of a dilemma after all. Um, I just feel like Naughty Dog realizes they're a big fish in a small pond as far as video game storytelling goes. So they're not like pushing themselves to. I don't. They're just not. I just feel like in a post-apocalyptic setting, it's just ripe for all these like existential, like you know, sociological topics, and they don't go far enough into anything to. I wasn't moved by anything they tried to do. I just felt it was flat, like I said in the beginning of this segment. Um, I know that might sound a little cynical to say big fish in a small pond, but that's just the way I see it. And I sort of mentioned this in the beginning of the video where I said people tend to give these games A for effort, but I just feel like if these games aspired to, tell these really engrossing stories, they should be compared to the best storytelling, media like books and movies and stuff like that. I just don't feel like The Last of Us explores these deep topics in the same way that other post-apocalyptic that genre does for movies and books and stuff like that, like The Road by Cormac McCarthy and stuff like that. That's just me being honest. But it's not completely bad, which I'll get into later. But I just felt like it also had some pacing problems. While playing, I couldn't help but feel like the middle 80% of the game could have been avoided, like from a narrative standpoint, like purpose wise. By that I mean like Joel and Ellie that go from place to place, only to be told by the people they encounter the thing they're looking for is somewhere else. And I know this allows them to go to more areas and flesh out the world more. And obviously, like in a video game, you need different environments and stuff like that. So that made sense. But it was just off-putting to me that they sort of basically use a story trope that harkens back to the Super Mario Brothers days. Thank you, Mario, but our princess is in another castle. Like that's pretty much what this game does, um, without using those same words, obviously. But one thing I really did like about the story was the fact that it leaves a lot to the imagination. They deliberately don't answer all the questions, and by the end, it's still not completely clear why the world is in the state it's in. And the ending is also slightly ambiguous. Can't get into it any further, but this is pretty much the antithesis of like Metal Gear Solid 4, where it took its sweet time to explain every little detail in order to tie up all the loose ends that the bloated series like introduced like through all those four games. Um, and I also liked how sort of the subtlety of the character interactions, as I said earlier. I wish I could get into it. This is kind of probably annoying for those of you who haven't played the game to hear me sort of like tease stuff and not talk about them. But I just, I wish I could do the spoiler filled like reviews, but I know most people don't like that stuff. Again, you'll have to message me if you want my thoughts on this in detail. But But yeah, overall, I thought the story was, it could have been better. It was good for a video game, but that's that. It's good for a video game. It's not good for a story in general. It's still better than most video game stories. So, and it obviously compelled me enough to finish the game, which I can't say about Bioshock and stuff like that. So yeah, it has that going for it. But yeah, this video is already long enough as it is. I obviously had a lot to say about this game. It has so much to it, but we'll just wrap it up there. But overall, I was pleasantly surprised by The Last of Us. It wasn't a game I thought I would like, but yeah, I ended up really digging it. And while it doesn't have a great story, like I sort of went into earlier, like I said, I found myself enjoying the surprisingly deep combat mechanics of the game, and the world Naughty Dog created is also realized for what it is. It's a really interesting world. I'd like to know more about it. Um, and the game's surprising difficulty and the game's grim tone makes it a hard game to marathon. Actually, it took me about 5 to 7 days to beat. Metal Gear Solid I beat in like 2 or 3 sittings because it's so much easier to play in terms of like you're always having fun. It's not You're not always having quote unquote fun. It's like very grim, as I said. For that reason, I'm not sure if I'll go back to it anytime soon. Um, one day I will, because this game is good enough to warrant that. But I guess I should also mention that it does have a multiplayer mode. I honestly have no interest in trying that. Uh, I just feel like this is just a single player game at heart. So yeah, I just don't really want to play multiplayer Last of Us. And it does have New Game Plus, which sort of incentivizes you to play it again. You get all your like weapon upgrades and stuff like that when you start the new game, which is really cool. I do recommend that you play the game on normal, just so you can sort of respect the intricacies of its, the game design. Like on easy, you're just like plowing through everything. I'd imagine, so it's like why bother playing properly? So it's like I just recommend that you play on normal. Um, as far as how good the game is, I definitely say it's a top three PS3 game. Along with Metal Gear Solid 4 and Journey. I'm not sure where I'd rank it because obviously, when a game just comes out, it's hard to rank it. Because sometimes when you play a great game, 2 weeks later you're like, it wasn't really that great. But obviously, it's a month after I beat this game, I think, or 3 weeks or something, and I still think it's a really great game. So that does say something, I think. But yeah, definitely a top three PS3 game. Even if you're not a Naughty Dog fan, like I'm not, definitely recommended. And yeah, that's The Last of Us. I also did finish New Super Mario Bros. U finally after like 8 months of having it, and that will be my next review. Sorry for not having more crazy asides like I do in all my other reviews, but like I said, uh, there was a ton of things on my mind when it came to this game, and I didn't want my review to be 40 minutes. So, but yeah, thanks for watching. I really appreciate it. And if you have, anything you'd want to, talk to me about regarding this game, let me know. Peace out.